My name is Harold. I'm 78 years old, and I live alone. Well, mostly ever since my wife passed. My son Daniel insisted I move in with him and his wife, Claire. He said it was for my own good, but deep down, I knew something wasn't. Right. I gave them everything, my savings, my house, even the family business. All I kept was a small lockbox with a few personal things, some old photos, and the last will I ever wrote. I wasn't supposed to be awake that night, but my 8-year-old granddaughter Lily, she tiptoed into my room, trembling, eyes wide open. She clutched my hand and whispered, "Grandpa, tonight, my parents are going to take away your fortune." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" I asked. She looked down, scared. "I heard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen. They said you were too old to know what you're signing, and that after tonight, everything would be theirs, and you'd be in the home." I was shaking, not from fear, but heartbreak. I raised that boy. I trusted him with everything so. I waited, quiet, still, listening through the crack of the door, and just after midnight, I heard Claire's voice. "Did you put the sleeping pills in his tea?" Daniel replied, "Of course. He won't remember a thing when he wakes up. The papers are ready. After this, it's all ours." They were planning to forge my signature, but I wasn't asleep, and I wasn't going to let them win. I got out of bed, opened my small box, and took out my phone. Yes, I had recorded everything. The next morning, I didn't say a word. I called my lawyer, my old friend, Thomas, and in just 24 hours, Daniel and Claire were served. The business was restored in my name, the will updated, and custody of Lily. Let's just say she lives with me now, where she's safe, because in the end, blood doesn't always mean loyalty, but love, real love, like that of an innocent child. That's what saves you. Asterisk, for most of my life, I believed in simple things: honesty, hard work, and family. I built everything around those three values. My name is Harold, and I wasn't always alone. Decades ago, I was a husband, a father, and a small-town businessman. My wife, Margaret, was my light, soft-spoken, gentle, always humming some tune in the kitchen that made the house feel like home. We were married for 52 years. She stood by me when I started my auto repair shop with nothing but a few wrenches and a prayer. Together, we raised our son Daniel, the boy I thought would carry our legacy. But life doesn't always unfold the way you expect. When Margaret passed away, something inside me broke. The house felt colder, emptier. Her favorite chair sat untouched for weeks. Her perfume still lingered faintly in our bedroom, and I caught myself calling out to her, forgetting she was no longer there to answer. Grief is strange. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It steals your appetite, dulls your senses, and makes every ticking second feel heavier. I'd sit by the window for hours, just staring at the garden she used to tend. The roses were withering, just like me. My son visited once a week, sometimes less. He'd say things like, "Dad, you can't live alone like this, or you should move in with us. It'll be easier for everyone." And I believed he meant well. I mean, he was my son. So I made a decision. I sold the house Margaret and I built together. I signed over my business to Daniel. I packed only a few boxes, old photographs, a few books, the locked wooden box I never let anyone touch. Then I moved into their house, a modern, polished place, but cold. There were no family portraits on the walls, no clutter, no warm thought at first. I tried to adjust. I stayed out of their way, kept to my room, read in silence. My granddaughter Lily, oh, that little soul, she'd come in with her sketchbook, lie on the rug, and draw for hours while I told her stories of when her father was her age. But as days passed, I noticed the subtle shifts. Claire, my daughter-in-law, didn't speak to me unless she had to. Daniel started treating me like I was fragile glass, more out of convenience than concern. My meals became solitary. My voice felt like an intrusion. One night, I heard Claire say something when she thought I wasn't listening. "He's just sitting on all that money. He doesn't even need it. It stung. I hadn't thought of myself as a burden, not until that moment. I began to feel invisible in my own family. There was no longer a seat for me at the table, no longer a conversation that included me. I thought maybe I was imagining things, maybe it was grief clouding my mind, but each passing day confirmed it. I wasn't part of the family. I was a possession. What they didn't know was that I had planned for everything long ago. Margaret and I had drafted a will. We believed in protecting the future. We believed our legacy should go to those who carried our values, not just our name. That will, those documents, they were safely tucked inside that wooden box I kept under lock and key. But I hadn't touched them in months. I hadn't even opened the box since I moved in, because I still believed in Daniel. I believed in the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, the one who used to say "I love you," Dad, every night before bed. I didn't want to believe that same boy could become a man ruled by greed, and yet, every day, their conversations grew colder. Every word sounded rehearsed. I could feel them watching me, not with love, but calculation. I had given them everything, and in return, they gave me silence. It's a painful thing to feel unwanted by the very people you raised. It makes you question everything, your past decisions, your sacrifices, your trust. But there was one thing they underestimated. Old age doesn't mean weakness. It means experience. It means patience. And it means knowing when to act and when to wait. So I stayed quiet. I listened. I observed. And most importantly, I kept loving Lily, because in her eyes, I still mattered. In her tiny arms wrapped around my neck at bedtime, I still felt like Grandpa. Not a burden, not a signature, not a wallet, just Grandpa. And that love, that pure, innocent love, would become the very thing that would save me. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was this: I had lost my wife. I had given up my home. And now, I was slowly losing the only thing I had left, my dignity. Until one night, a whisper shattered the silence. "Grandpa, tonight, my parents are going to take away your fortune." Asterisk greed doesn't walk through the front door with loud footsteps. It creeps in quietly. At first, it wears a smile, but slowly, the mask begins to crack. For the first few weeks in my son's home, I tried convincing myself everything was fine. Claire, my daughter-in-law, kept things formal. Her tone was polite, but hollow. Her kindness mechanical, the kind that disappears once the lights are off. I noticed how she avoided eye contact during dinner, how my name was never mentioned in their conversations, how my presence seemed like an awkward placeholder in their carefully curated life. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought, maybe they just need time to adjust. I wanted to believe that, but deep down, I knew something was off. It began with subtle questions. "Dad, do you remember where you put the house papers?" "Oh, we were just wondering, how much did you sell your workshop for again? Do you still have that savings account?" Each time, I answered cautiously, brushing it off with humor or silence, but their eyes always flickered with something else, something cold, calculated. And one afternoon, I overheard them, not by accident, but because I'd learned by then to walk slowly and listen carefully. Claire was in the kitchen, her voice sharper than usual. "He's sitting on all that money, Daniel. We're scraping by, and he's got enough to buy this house twice." Daniel sighed. "It's just not that simple. He's old, but he's not stupid." Claire snapped back. "Then make it simple. Convince him, guilt him, trick him. I don't care. Just get him to sign the papers." I froze. Every bone in my body ached, not from age, but from the sheer weight of betrayal. This was my own son, the boy I taught how to ride a bike, the boy I bailed out of trouble in college, the boy I gave my business to. And now, he was conspiring behind my back with his wife to steal from me. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I began observing everything with fresh eyes. The sudden shift in their generosity, the way Claire always hovered when I opened my lockbox to retrieve documents, how Daniel would walk into my room unannounced, pretending to check on me. But really, his eyes darted around, looking, always looking. They weren't just interested in my money. They were plotting to take it. I caught a glimpse of papers left out on the kitchen counter. One night, they looked like real estate transfer documents. My name was on them, but I never signed them. And then there was the will, my original, handwritten, lawyer-stamped will, the one that gave part of my assets to Lily's college fund and left a donation to the church Margaret loved. I had checked it last week, but when I opened the wooden box the next day, it was gone. In its place was a freshly printed version, signed, in shaky handwriting that wasn't mine. They had forged it. They had actually forged my will. I should have been furious, but instead, I just felt empty. Not because they were trying to steal from me, but because they saw me as nothing more than a signature, a dollar sign. They didn't see the man who raised them. They didn't see the broken-hearted widower trying to stay afloat in a house. That wasn't his home. They just saw opportunity. I began sleeping with the door locked. I installed a small camera hidden inside a bookshelf, and I kept my phone recording when I left the room. I wasn't going to fight them with fists. I was going to fight them with proof. Meanwhile, Lily kept drawing, kept smiling, kept telling me bedtime stories that she made up from her wild, colorful imagination. And one day, she asked the question that cut deeper than any betrayal. "Grandpa, if Mommy and Daddy are mad at you, can I still love you?" I swallowed hard, held her hand, and said, "You can always love me, sweetheart, because real love doesn't disappear when things get complicated." She nodded and hugged me tighter than ever. That night, she would save me in ways I never imagined. But before that, the darkness in this house had to fully reveal itself, and I had to be ready, because the trap was already set. Asters, sometimes the truth doesn't come from investigators or lawyers. It doesn't come from cameras or confessions. It comes from the innocent lips of a child. And that night, it came from Lily, my 8-year-old granddaughter, in a whisper that pierced my soul. The house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel and Claire had gone to their room early. They'd stopped talking to me directly in recent days. Like a storm was brewing, one they knew I wouldn't survive. I sat alone in my room, reading a worn copy of Treasure Island, a book I once read to Daniel when he was a boy. Back then, he believed in heroes. Now, he was plotting to become a villain in his own father's story. Just as I turned the page, I heard a soft knock. Not loud, not demanding, just gentle, like someone asking for safety. "Come in," I said softly, and there she was, Lily, in her little pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed bear. Her eyes weren't full of their usual light. They were wide, worried, scared. She closed the door behind her, walked up to my chair, and whispered, "Grandpa, tonight, my parents are going to take away your fortune." I froze. The words didn't come from a grown-up with motives or lies. They came from the last pure soul in this house, a child, my granddaughter. I gently placed the book down. "Okay, kiddo, what did you say?" I asked, my throat dry. She looked down, her small fingers twisting the bear's ear nervously. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said, "but I couldn't sleep, so I got water, and I heard Mommy and Daddy talking in the kitchen. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears." What did they say?" Her voice trembled. "Mommy said you were too old to understand anything now. She told Daddy that if you just signed the new papers, they wouldn't have to wait for you to go away. She didn't say die. She couldn't. Her heart was still too kind. Then Daddy said, he'll be out cold. Claire, just mix the drops in his tea. We'll get the signature tonight." Drops? They were going to drug me. I leaned back, breathless. My hands were cold. They didn't just want to steal from me. They wanted me helpless. My own son. I looked at Lily, who was watching me, concerned. "I didn't mean to spy," she said. "I just thought I had to tell you. I don't want them to take your money. You're nice, Grandpa. You let me draw in your room." That sentence, "You let me draw in your room," that's why she loved me. Not because of money, not because of property, but because I saw her. I welcomed her. I loved her. I pulled her into a hug, tighter than I ever had before. And in that moment, I knew something had changed. The game was no longer about defense. It was time to go on the offense. "Lily," I said, holding her shoulders, "you are very brave. What you did tonight was more than most adults would ever do." She smiled faintly, but still looked unsure. Are they going to be mad at me? Not if Grandpa handles things right, I said. Now, go back to your room and lock the door, just in case. She nodded, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and tiptoed out. The moment the door shut, I sprang into action. I went to my drawer and pulled out my recorder, still running. I had been recording every day for the last week, but now I had something else. Lily's eyewitness account. I had my camera running to, pointed at the hallway. I aimed it now toward the door, and then I waited. Hours passed. Midnight crept closer. Finally, I heard footsteps, slow, careful, creeping like thieves. In the night, a knock. "Dad, you awake?" I didn't respond. The door creaked open. Claire stepped in, holding a cup of tea. "Let's just get it over with," she whispered behind her to Daniel. "He's half asleep already." I closed my eyes halfway, pretending to drift in and out. Claire approached the bed. I watched from under my lashes as she placed the cup on my side table. Daniel laid the papers next to it, and then Claire said the words that sealed their fate. "Once he signs this, we move the money. Tomorrow, he goes to Shady Pines. Shady Pines, a retirement home, a cage." They turned to leave, thinking they'd won. But I sat up straight and said, "You're going to prison for this." They froze. "What?" I turned on the lamp. The camera was blinking red. The recorder beeped. Their faces drained of color. "I heard everything," I said, "from the kitchen, from the hallway, from my granddaughter." Claire looked at Daniel. "You said he wouldn't wake up," she hissed. Daniel stammered, "Dad, it's not what it." "Save it," I said, reaching for my phone. "Tomorrow morning, the police and my lawyer will both be getting copies of this." I walked past them, down the hallway, and knocked on Lily's door. She opened it slowly, eyes wide. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said. "You did the right thing." And as she hugged me again, tighter than ever, I realized something. Sometimes innocence sees what grown-ups can't, and sometimes the smallest voice carries the loudest truth. Asters, some moments arrive like thunder, loud, crashing, impossible to ignore. But the ones that truly change your life, they arrive like a whisper, soft, unexpected, an irreversible. It was nearly midnight. The kind of night where time feels frozen and silence stretches like a shadow across every room. I was already in bed, my lights off, my heart heavy. The events of the past few days played over in my head, on repeat. The forged will, the stolen documents, the lies and manipulation that came from the very people I once called family. But tonight wasn't about heartbreak. It was about clarity, and it came in the form of a whisper. "Grandpa, tonight my parents are going to take away your fortune." Those 11 words changed everything, not just because of what they meant, but because of who said them. My granddaughter, Lily, a little girl with ribbons in her hair and truth in her voice, had wandered into my room, barefoot and wide-eyed. Her voice trembled, but her spirit didn't. She didn't even know what fortune truly meant, but she knew something was wrong, and she trusted me enough to tell me. That whisper, so gentle, so honest, sliced through every lie in this house, like a knife through silk. After she left the room, I sat there in the dark, stunned. All this time, I've been collecting evidence, silently preparing myself for the inevitable. But now, I realized I wasn't preparing for battle anymore. The battle had just begun, and that whisper was the signal to act. I got up, slowly, every bone in my body aching, not from age, but from betrayal. I pulled out my phone, checked the recording app. It was still running. I set it where it could capture the door, the bed, the table, everything. Then I reached for the old wooden box again, the one I never let anyone touch. The one they had tried to open, search, and replace things inside. But tonight, I opened. In myself die inside were the original legal documents, my real will, the deed to my old house. Bank statements that clearly showed where every cent had gone after I sold my business. And tucked under it all, a copy of the voice memo from Lily, her soft little voice saying those words that would become the key to everything. They said you wouldn't know what you're signing. They're going to make you drink sleepy tea. They said everything will be theirs by tomorrow. I backed up every file to a USB stick and slipped it into my sock. Yes, my sock. Call it paranoid. But after what I heard, I trusted no one in this house, except the child who whispered the truth at exactly 12:17 a.m. I heard footsteps outside my room. Not rushed, not heavy, just deliberate and then a knock. Dad, you awake? I didn't answer. The door creaked open. I could feel the shift in air as Claire stepped in first, followed by Daniel. My eyes stayed mostly closed. My breathing calmed. Claire whispered, okay, the tea's on the table. Let's do this fast. Daniel laid papers on the side table. Just guide his hand. Even if it's shaky, it'll pass. Guide my hand. They really believe I was that far gone. Claire leaned in. I could smell the tea. Something was off. Too bitter. Too strange. Like medicine masked in peppermint. They stood there for a moment, unsure if I would wake. Claire turned to Daniel. Should we just take his hand and press it down? That was it. My eyes open. My voice steady. Sharper than they had ever heard. If you touch me again, you'll both regret it. They jolted back like I'd struck them. Claire's jaw dropped. Dad, you're awake. Daniel stuttered. We were just drugging me, forging my signature, stealing what isn't yours. I finished for him. The room fell into frozen silence. Then I picked up my phone from the table and held it up. Say hello to the police. Their eyes followed the blinking red light. The live recording. Claire lunged forward. Turn that off, she shouted. But I stood up, stronger than they expected. I held my ground. It's already saved, and so is the audio of your late night kitchen meeting. I know everything, and so will everyone else. Daniel looked pale. His hands trembled. Dad, it's not what you think. Stop calling me that. I said coldly. You don't get to use that word anymore. Claire's voice turned venomous. This is all your fault. You should have just stayed in your little room and signed the damn paper. That's when I said it. No, what I should have done was never trust either of you with anything. But I did, because I believed you were family. But family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't poison. Family doesn't forge. Family doesn't steal from the old man who gave them everything. Claire scoffed and stormed out. Daniel followed, but not before casting one final glance, part guilt, part fear. As the door slammed, I sat back down. My heart was pounding, my hands still shaking, but something had changed. I wasn't afraid anymore, because the whisper I heard that night, the whisper of a child's warning, had become my shield, my proof, my salvation. Lily saved me, not with power, not with wealth, but with the only weapon they didn't have, honest love. And that whisper changed everything. Asterisk, there's a kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises, no blood, no broken bones, just a silence, a weight in your chest that refuses to move. That's the pain of betrayal. And the cruelest part, it doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those you love the most. It comes from your own blood. My son, Daniel, was the first person I ever held in my arms and promised to protect. I watched him take his first steps, listened to his dreams, stood in the rain during his soccer games, worked double shifts so he could go to college without debt. When Margaret and I built the garage business from scratch, it was always for him, not for the money, not for our pride, but so that Daniel would never have to struggle the way we did. And when she died, when the woman I shared my soul with was lowered into the ground, he held my hand at the funeral and whispered, I'll take care of you now, Dad. I believed him, so I signed over their business, moved into their home, trusted him with the rest of what I had, the paperwork, the bank accounts. the keys to what was left of my life, and in return, he tried to drug me, forge my name, steal what wasn't his, throw me into a care home like I was a dying plant that needed to be trimmed out of sight. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like mold in the corners of a once clean house. I remember standing in the kitchen one morning, pouring my coffee, when I heard Claire say to him, "You better get that old man to sign something before he forgets how to hold a pen." And Daniel laughed. He laughed. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't financial pressure. It was choice. Cold, deliberate choice. And that kind of betrayal, it doesn't just sting. It rewrites your entire memory. You start questioning everything. The birthday cards, the family dinners, every hug that now feels rehearsed, every "I love you." Dad, that might have just been a setup for one more signature. And worse, you feel foolish because you didn't see it coming. You feel like a blind man who held open the door to the thieves. After the night they tried to drug me, after I exposed them, Daniel didn't say sorry. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He stood there, frozen in the hallway, ashamed, not of what he did, but of getting caught. And as I looked at him, I saw not the man I raised, but a stranger wearing his face. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the coldness, the indifference, the fact that he had calculated it all, step by step, with the woman he called his wife. What they forgot was that I was still human, still aware, still capable of feeling. They treated me like an obstacle, a liability, a roadblock to their well thought. But what hurt the most wasn't losing my money, it was losing my son, because the man I loved was already gone. He didn't die. He just disappeared behind greed, replaced by someone who spoke with the same voice, wore the same smile, but no longer had a heart I recognized. I sat with Lily the next morning. We were on the porch, her drawing, me sipping tea she made herself. I hadn't told her everything, but she knew enough. She looked up at me and asked, "Are you sad, Grandpa?" I smiled faintly, a little, because of Daddy. I paused. And then I told her the truth, the kind that doesn't need details. I'm sad because sometimes people change, and it's not your fault, and it's not mine, but it still hurts. She didn't say a word. She just placed her drawing in my lap, a picture of her and me, sitting on the porch. Under it, she had written, "Me and Grandpa, the ones who don't lie." That drawing now sits on my desk, because in a world where my own blood tried to erase me, Lily reminded me that love isn't always inherited. Sometimes it's earned. The heartbreak of betrayal, yes, it changed me, but it also freed me. Freed me from the illusion that I owed anyone blind loyalty just because of DNA. And now I live, not with sadness, but with clarity. Clarity that the people who deserve your trust will never make you doubt it. Pastor's pain, when unspoken, becomes its own kind of power. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It grows slowly, quietly, until one day it transforms into something unshakable. That's what happened to me. After the betrayal, after the whisper from Lily, after I caught my son and his wife red-handed in the act of poisoning and forgery, I should have broken down. Most men would. Some would cry, some would leave, some would forgive, just to keep the illusion of family. But I did none of that. I watched, and I learned. You see, pain teaches you how to see clearly, to hear what's not being said, to stand still while others unravel. And that's what I did. In the days that followed the confrontation, I didn't yell. I didn't curse them. I didn't storm out of the house with boxes or threats. I just became silent. But make no mistake, it wasn't weakness. It was preparation. I had the recordings. I had the altered will with the forged signature. I had the video from that night. I even had Lily's voice, the innocent, irrefutable truth of a child, captured and preserved. And so I moved like a man with a purpose. I met my lawyer. I reactivated the original will. I froze all asset transfers. I filed a legal injunction to protect what was rightfully mine, and I made sure the authorities were aware of what had taken place. Behind closed doors. Daniel and Claire didn't know all this, not yet, because I said nothing. I smiled when I passed them in the hallway. I joined them at dinner like I used to. I let them think I was still tired, still confused, still broken. But I was watching, and behind that silence was a strength they had never seen in me before. Because here's what they didn't understand. I built a business from dirt. I survived poverty, war, recession. I buried the love of my life and still woke up the next day. I didn't survive all that just to be taken down by my own flesh and blood. The pain that caused me was deep, but I let it root itself in discipline, in resilience, in quiet, focused revenge, not through violence, but through truth. You want to know what real strength looks like? It's a man sitting across from his betrayer at the breakfast table, smiling politely, knowing that in 48 hours, the police will be knocking on his door. It's holding your granddaughter's hand and telling her, "Don't worry, sweetheart, everything is going to be okay," and meaning every word because you already made sure of it. It's walking past the bedroom where they once whispered plans to erase you, and knowing those same whispers are now evidence in a criminal case. That's the strength they never saw coming. They thought age made me weak. They thought grief made me blind. They thought love made me foolish, but age gave me patience. Grief gave me clarity, and love, real love, gave me a reason to fight. And as the silence deepened in that house, I could feel the fear begin to rise in them. They didn't know what I had done. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew. They had awakened something in me they never expected. That's the beauty of silent strength. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need a spotlight. It just waits. And when the time is right, it moves with precision. 3 days later, Claire tried to play nice. She brought me tea. No drugs this time. Just warm chamomile, or so she claimed. I accepted it, smiled. And the moment she left, I poured it into the sink. I wasn't paranoid. I was aware. That's what pain teaches you, to stop assuming people mean well just because they should. Later, that evening, Daniel knocked on my door. "Dad, I think we should talk." I looked at him. For a second, I thought I saw the boy I once knew, the one who used to sneak cookies from the jar and hide behind his mother's apron. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who let greed rot the roots of his soul. "I think we should talk to," I said calmly. He sat. I sat. He started with an apology, a weak one, a rehearsed one. "Claire and I were stressed. We didn't mean any harm. We were just thinking about the future, your future." I nodded. "I know," I said, "and I've made arrangements for it." He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly. "Tomorrow morning, you'll receive a visit from my lawyer, from the court, and from the local authorities." His face turned pale. "Dad, what did you do?" "I protected what you tried to steal," I said, "and I did it without yelling, without threatening, without touching a single hair on your head, because I don't need to fight like a child. I fight like a man who's already been through hell and learned how to walk out stronger." He sat there speechless. I stood up and opened the door. "This conversation is over. You'll deal with the consequences now. Not because I hate you, but because I loved you too much to let you get away with this." He left, slowly, broken. And in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt peace, because my pain had turned into protection and my silence into strength. Asterisk every household secrets, whispers in hallways, doors that close just a little, to quietly, conversations that end the moment you walk in. And sometimes, those secrets are darker than you ever imagined. My son's house, the one I moved into after losing my wife, was beautiful on the outside. Modern furniture, polished floors, fancy kitchen. But beauty means nothing when the walls echo with betrayal. After I exposed Daniel and Claire's plan to drug me and forge my will, the atmosphere changed. They tried to play it cool, acted as if everything was normal. Claire even started cooking meals again, smiling, asking if I needed anything. But it was all fake, because what they didn't know was that I knew more than they thought. I didn't. just stumbled upon their plan one night. I had been watching, listening, recording, because when you've lived as long as I have, you don't confront a snake when you see its tail. You wait, you follow it back to the head, and what I uncovered broke my heart all over again. It began with Lily, my granddaughter, the only pure soul in that house. She had come into my room one evening with something clenched in her small hand. "Grandpa, I found this in Mommy's drawer." I wasn't snooping. I was just looking for my markers. She handed me a piece of paper, folded, crumpled, smudged with fingerprints. When I opened it, my blood went cold. It was a draft version of the will. But this one was different from the forged version. They tried to trick me into signing. This one had everything in Claire's name. Not Daniel's, not Lily's, Claire. She had planned to cut her own husband out of the inheritance. After using him to get it, I hid the paper immediately and told Lily everything was fine. But it wasn't that, so I did what I had to do. I went into their room when they weren't home, and I searched, not out of curiosity, but survival. In the back of Claire's closet, behind a showbox filled with old receipts, was a black envelope. Inside were documents that made my stomach turn. A second forged will, power of attorney documents with my signature, also forged, bank transfer forms, ready to move money into a private account I'd never seen before, and at the bottom, a post-it note in Claire's handwriting. "Once funds transfer, call Shady Pines for intake. Don't tell Daniel yet." She was going to ship me off to a home without telling her own husband. Not that he didn't deserve it, but still, even betrayal has levels. Claire had taken it further, deeper. She wasn't just stealing. She was eliminating me, quietly, legally, and completely. That's when I realized something terrifying. She was never just following Daniel's plan. She was the one behind it all. Daniel, he was weak, easily influenced, blindly loyal to the woman he married. But Claire, she was dangerous, calculated, 2 steps ahead of everyone. And I had been living under her roof, eating her food, sleeping under her silence, but not anymore. I made copies of everything, gave them to my lawyer, my accountant, and just in case, a trusted neighbor I'd known for decades. Then I waited. I still needed proof of her next move, and she didn't disappoint. The next night, she came into my room, all smiles, holding another cup of tea. "I made this just for you," she said. I looked at her. "I'm not thirsty tonight." She hesitated. That was the moment I knew. She was still trying, still hoping I'd fall asleep, sign something, disappear quietly. But when she turned to leave, I said something that made her stop. "I wonder what Daniel would think if he knew your real plan." She froze. "I'm sorry." I stood up. "I found the papers, the ones you were going to file after you took everything. You were going to cut him out too, just like you tried to cut me out. Only difference is I survived long enough to find out." She turned pale. For the first time, she had no words, and that silence, that was my victory. The next morning, I told Daniel everything, showed him the documents, the recordings, even Lily's drawing, labeled Mommy, said Grandpa is going away. At first, he denied it. "This isn't what it looked like." Then, he got quiet, and I knew. He knew. His face crumbled, because in that moment, he realized he wasn't just a thief. He was a fool, used by the very woman he let replace his conscience. They screamed at each other for hours. I didn't listen. I packed my things, because the house wasn't mine. It never was. Not truly. It belonged to secrets, lies, greed, and I was done living among ghosts. Before I left, I told Lily goodbye. She hugged me, tears in her eyes. "Will I see you again, Grandpa?" I smiled, holding her tight. "Yes, sweetheart. This time, it'll be you visiting my house. Some secrets are buried in basements. Others sleep behind bedroom doors. But when revealed, they don't just break families. They expose the truth behind the smiles. Some people trust words, some trust tears. But me, after everything I'd seen, I learned to trust proof, not promises, not apologies. Not the way someone smiles at the dinner table and pretends everything is fine. No, I trusted something much smaller and far more powerful, a hidden recorder. It wasn't fancy, just a tiny black device I bought quietly one afternoon after I moved in. Something in my gut told me I might need it, not because I suspected what would happen, but because I've lived long enough to know when people start asking too many questions about your money, you stop answering, you start recording. And thank God I did, because in the moments when Daniel and Claire thought I was too old to notice, too confused to care, too tired to fight back, I had that little recorder listening to everything. Had sat inside my drawer, taped under the kitchen table, hidden between my books. It captured the truth without blinking, and while their words were covered in sugar during the day, at night, the poison came out. The first recording that changed everything was short, just 90 seconds. Claire, he's stubborn, but stubborn men fall, especially when they don't know what's in their tea. Daniel, let's just hope he doesn't remember what he signs. Claire, by the time he realizes, we'll already have everything. I remember hearing those words play back for the first time, my fingers trembling, not from fear, but from rage, the kind of rage that doesn't scream, the kind that watches, waits, and then acts. I didn't confront them immediately. No, that's not how to handle snakes. You don't swat at the tail. You follow it to the head and strike when it matters. So I kept recording, night after night. Their whispers turned bolder. They didn't know I had placed another device behind the hallway plant. Didn't know the lamp in my room had a small mic tucked under its base. Didn't know that quiet arguments after midnight were being saved second by second. But I knew that when Claire started planning to file the forged will, when she joked about sending me to a retirement home where he can drool in peace, the recorder caught that too. And then came the conversation that sealed their fate. Claire, once we get the signature, it's over. He won't even know it's fake. We can shred the old one, move the money, and tell Lily he's on vacation. Daniel, are we sure this is safe? Claire, it's only unsafe if he wakes up. They laughed, like I was nothing more than a roadblock, an obstacle, a confused old man whose time had passed. But what they didn't know, that confused old man had already handed those recordings to a lawyer, had already stored backups in a cloud account they didn't know existed, had already mailed a USB drive to an old friend, an ex-police officer. That's the thing about preparedness. It doesn't need attention. It doesn't make noise. It just waits. And when the time came, when I finally sat down across from my son and told him I knew everything, I didn't raise my voice. I simply hit play, and their voices, their own voices, turned against them. Daniel's face drained. Claire's eyes widened. The recorder on the table blinked red, steady, undeniable. This is illegal, Claire stammered. No, I said, calm as ever. What you did is illegal. What I did is smart. And in that moment, the power shifted, not because I was stronger, not because I yelled, but because I had proof, because I was prepared. The police listened. So did the lawyer. And when Claire tried to twist the story, to cry, to act like the victim, the recordings told the truth. They told every truth that she thought would stay locked behind closed doors. And that little black recorder, it didn't just save my money, it saved my dignity, my freedom, my ability to walk away without being erased. So now, when people ask me how I survived something so dark, I say one thing: I listened. When most people ignore the whispers, I recorded them. When most people fall apart, I planned. When most people forgive soon, I waited. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's a trap, a test, a net you throw with patience and pull tight when they least expect it. That recorder now sits on my desk, a reminder, not just of what happened, but of what I overcame. Because in a house full of lies, the smallest tool, a quiet device, became the loudest voice of truth. Asterisk, there comes a time in every war when you don't need to raise your sword anymore because the truth has already done the cutting. That moment came for me the morning I left their house, but I didn't walk away in shame. I didn't leave as a broken man. I left with something they thought they could take from me, my dignity. After the dust settled, after the police had visited, after the forged documents had been exposed, after the lawyers had stepped in, the home no longer felt like a home. It was a battlefield. The walls knew too much, the air felt heavy, and the people I once called family avoided eye contact like criminals after sentencing. Daniel, he couldn't speak to me anymore, not because I threatened him, but because he saw the truth now. He had let greed hollow him out. He had traded his father's trust for a signature on a paper soaked in lies. And Claire, she didn't just lose the fight. She lost control. Her voice, once loud and sharp, had gone quiet, not out of regret, but exposure. She wasn't used to being seen for what she truly was. And then there was Lily, my granddaughter, the girl who whispered the truth that started it all. She was the only one in the house who still ran to hug me in the mornings, the only one who hadn't lied, the only one I couldn't leave without saying goodbye. That morning, I packed slowly, not because I was hesitant, but because I wanted to feel every second of freedom. For months, I had lived in that house as a guest in the life I helped build, treated like a burden, watched like a problem, targeted like a vault. But that morning, I was walking out as a man who had reclaimed his story. I put on my best coat, the same one I wore to Margaret's funeral, not out of sadness, but symbolism. Because that morning, I was burying something too, the false image I had once clung to. That family always means love. That blood always means loyalty. That history always means home. Sometimes it DOES and single quotes T. Sometimes family is just a title. Love must be proven and dignity must be fought for. As I zipped my last bag, Lily entered the room. "Are you leaving now?" she asked, her voice trembling. I knelt beside her. "I am," I said, "but not forever. You'll come visit me." "Is it because of what Mommy and Daddy did?" I paused, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, but it's not your fault." It never was. She handed me something, a folded piece of paper, a drawing. It showed me standing outside a house, not the one I was leaving, but a new one, with flowers in the window and a big sun in the sky, and her holding my hand. Under it, she had written in shaky letters, "Grandpa's real home, where nobody lies." I choked back tears. This little girl had seen more truth in her short life than her parents ever did. She had saved me, not with evidence, but with love. I hugged her tight, and I whispered, "Thank you for being the one person who never lied to me." As I walked out of the house, Daniel stood at the end of the hallway, his eyes sunken, his hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. There was nothing left to say, because dignity isn't loud. It doesn't need a speech. It doesn't beg for closure. It just walks away, with its head held high. I stepped into the taxi waiting outside, my suitcase in one hand, Lily's drawing in the other, and as the car pulled away, I looked back one last time, not in regret, but in relief. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with something far more valuable than the money they tried to steal. I was leaving with my name, my integrity, and the unshakable peace of knowing I stood tall when they stooped low. That is the real victory, not revenge, not courtroom drama, not even punishment, but walking away clean from the dirtiest battle of your life. Because sometimes honor isn't given to you, it's what you choose to take back, one quiet, steady step at a time.